Ryan Cole had been through dozens of architecture interviews, but never one on a beach at sunrise. Barefoot on the quiet sand, he stood across from a female CEO who chose the ocean over a boardroom. Maya West sat cross-legged near the shoreline, a laptop balanced on her knees, asking him to draw directly in the sand and show her how he saw the land, not as something to conquer, but something to work in harmony with. When the sun finally rose above the horizon, Ryan realized two unsettling truths. He wanted this job more than any opportunity he had ever pursued, and this strange meeting was already beginning to change his life. The coffee always came at 6:15. Ryan Cole had perfected the ritual over 3 years of single fatherhood, measuring the grounds with precision, listening for the familiar gurgle of the machine, pouring exactly 8 ounces into the same navy blue mug. By 6:30, he and Lily were at the kitchen table, her small feet swinging beneath her chair as she talked about yesterday's art class or tomorrow's spelling test. Everything had its place, its time, its predictable rhythm. The shirts hung pressed in his closet, sorted by color. The bills sat in neat stacks on his desk, paid 2 days before they were due. Even the crack in the kitchen tile near the refrigerator had become a kind of comfort, a familiar imperfection in an otherwise orderly world. Ryan had built this life deliberately, brick by careful brick, after his divorce 3 years ago. His ex-wife Sarah had left with words that still echoed in quiet moments, words about how he'd become boring, how the man she'd married had disappeared into spreadsheets and safety nets, how she couldn't breathe anymore in their too careful life. So Ryan had taken her criticism and turned it into armor. If boring meant Lily never had to worry, if predictable meant she always knew what to expect, then he'd be the most boring, predictable father in California. His small home office held evidence of this philosophy. Neat rows of architectural drawings for modest renovations and safe residential projects. Nothing risky, nothing that could fail spectacularly and leave his daughter without stability. But tucked in the bottom drawer of his desk, hidden beneath tax returns and old contracts, sat a portfolio of different work. Designs from before, when he dreamed bigger. An eco-resort built into a cliffside, a community center that looked like it was growing out of the earth itself. Buildings that took chances, that pushed boundaries, that made people stop and stare. He rarely looked at those drawings anymore. They belonged to someone else, someone who'd had the luxury of risk before he'd become responsible for another human being's entire world. The email arrived at 11:13 on a Tuesday night. Ryan had been reviewing plans for a kitchen remodel, the kind of straightforward project that paid bills and required no imagination. The subject line made him blink. Interview tomorrow. Sunrise Beach. Dress code. Whatever makes you comfortable. He read it 3 times, certain he'd misunderstood. Maya West, CEO of Greenwave Properties, a startup that was supposedly revolutionizing sustainable real estate development. They were looking for a lead architect. The position would involve, according to the brief description, creating resort properties that didn't just coexist with nature, but enhanced it. It was everything he used to dream about. The interview location and time, however, suggested the CEO might be slightly unhinged. 7 in the morning on a public beach. No office, no conference room. Just sand and ocean, and apparently whatever he felt comfortable wearing. Lily was asleep down the hall, her nightlight casting familiar shadows across her doorway. Ryan stood in his bedroom, staring at the pressed white shirt hanging ready for tomorrow, and felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Possibility. It felt dangerous. He should decline politely, stick to the kitchen remodel, keep his world small and manageable. But his hand was already typing a response before his careful brain could stop it. I'll be there. Thank you for the opportunity. He hit send before he could reconsider, then spent the next 30 minutes wondering if he'd just made a massive mistake. Morning came with its usual precision, but Ryan felt off balance. He changed shirts 3 times, uncertain what Whatever makes you comfortable, meant for a beach interview. The white button-up felt too formal. The polo seemed too casual. He finally settled on a blue Oxford, rolled the sleeves halfway, and told himself it was fine. Lily watched from her doorway, cereal bowl in hand, a knowing smile on her 7-year-old face. "You look nervous, Dad," she said. "Are you going somewhere special?" Ryan tried to explain about the interview, keeping it simple, but Lily just nodded sagely. "You should wear the blue one. You look good in blue." Her certainty made him smile. When had his daughter become the wise one? The beach parking lot was nearly empty at 6:45. Ryan grabbed his leather portfolio, feeling immediately ridiculous. Who brought a portfolio to a beach? But he was here now, so he walked across the sand, expensive shoes sinking with each step, until he saw her. Maya West stood near the water's edge, and Ryan's carefully prepared interview composure evaporated instantly. She wore black yoga shorts and a fitted tank top, her dark hair pulled back in a high ponytail. Her figure was athletic, confident, the kind of presence that made people turn and look not just because she was beautiful, but because she seemed to occupy space differently than everyone else, as if she'd made some private agreement with gravity to work on her terms. She had a laptop perched on a driftwood log and a yoga mat spread out on the sand, and she was stretching casually as if this were the most normal office in the world. "Ryan Cole?" she called out when she noticed him approaching. Her smile was warm but also amused, her eyes taking in his button-up shirt and leather shoes with obvious entertainment. "You wore business casual to the beach. That's adorable." Ryan felt his face heat. "I wasn't sure what the dress code actually meant," he admitted. Maya laughed, a genuine sound that somehow made him relax, despite his embarrassment. "It means I don't do traditional interviews. I want to see how people think when they're not stuck in a conference room trying to impress me with rehearsed answers. Come on, sit. Don't worry about the sand. It'll wash out." She patted the ground next to her mat, and Ryan carefully lowered himself onto the beach, portfolio still clutched protectively. The morning sun was climbing higher, painting the ocean in shades of gold and amber. Maya pulled up images on her laptop, satellite views of a stretch of coastline about 40 miles south. "This is what I bought last year," she said, and her voice shifted, became softer, more personal. 12 acres of protected coastline. Previous owner wanted to bulldoze it for a standard resort, maximum rooms, minimum character. I have a different vision. She turned the laptop toward him, but instead of showing him plans, she asked a question that caught him off guard. "What would you do with this? If money and regulations weren't obstacles, if you could design something that honored this place instead of dominating it, what would you build?" Ryan opened his portfolio automatically, ready to show her the safe residential work, the approved plans, the evidence that he was reliable and professional. But Maya shook her head. "I don't want to see what you've already done for other people. I want to see what you'd do if you weren't afraid." The words hit him like cold water. She couldn't possibly know about the hidden portfolio, about the dreams he'd boxed up. But her eyes were steady, challenging, and Ryan found himself setting aside the leather case and reaching instead for a piece of driftwood. He began sketching in the sand, rough lines at first, then more confident strokes. A resort that followed the natural curve of the land, buildings that stepped back from the cliff edge, creating terraces that doubled as gardens. Common areas open to the sky, private spaces that felt like tree houses. He talked as he drew, explaining how you could use the existing vegetation for natural cooling, how the orientation could maximize sunrise and sunset views without destroying habitat, how the whole place could run on solar and reclaimed water. Maya leaned closer to watch, and Ryan became acutely aware of her proximity. He could smell something subtle, maybe coconut sunscreen or sea salt. Could hear her breathing change as she followed his explanation. When he finally stopped, his hands covered in sand, he looked up to find her staring at him with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. "That," she said quietly, "is exactly what I've been trying to find." Not just a competent architect. Someone who actually sees what I see. She stood abruptly, brushing sand from her legs, and Ryan scrambled to his feet. "You're hired," Maya announced. "But I have one condition." Ryan's mind went blank. "Wait, that's it? You haven't even seen my portfolio, checked my references, asked about my experience with commercial projects." Maya picked up her laptop, rolled up her yoga mat, and fixed him with a look that was both serious and playful. "I just watched you design with passion in the sand. That tells me more than any portfolio. My condition is this. I need someone who can think outside the box. Someone willing to take risks. Someone who won't give me safe, mediocre designs because they're too afraid to try something brilliant. Can you be that person?" The question hung in the salt air between them. Ryan thought about his carefully controlled life, about Lily and stability, and never taking chances that might fail. He thought about the hidden portfolio and the man he used to be. Maya was watching him, waiting, and he realized she wasn't just offering him a job. She was offering him a choice about who he wanted to be. "I have a daughter," he heard himself say. "She depends on me. I can't afford to fail spectacularly." Maya's expression softened. "I'm not asking you to fail. I'm asking you to succeed bigger than you've let yourself imagine. Think about it. I need an answer by tomorrow morning." She handed him a business card with just her name and a phone number. "Text me." "And Ryan?" She smiled again, that same warm, amused smile. "Next time, wear shorts to the beach." Then she walked away, and Ryan stood alone with sand on his hands, and his entire worldview turned sideways. That evening, Lily noticed immediately that something had changed. She had a child's radar for adult moods, could sense distraction and preoccupation the way dogs sense storms coming. Over dinner, simple pasta because Ryan's mind wasn't on cooking, she finally asked directly, "What's wrong, Dad? You keep staring at your food like it might have answers." Ryan tried to explain about the interview, the strange CEO, the job offer that felt too good and too risky all at once. He didn't mention how attractive Maya had been, or how his hands had shaken when she leaned close. Some things were too complicated for 7-year-olds. But Lily's response surprised him. "Did you say yes? You should say yes. You always talk about wanting to build something cool, but then you just do boring kitchen stuff." Her honesty stung a little, mostly because it was accurate. "It's not boring. It's stable," Ryan defended. "Stability is important." Lily shrugged, twirling pasta on her fork. "Mom always said you were too scared to do anything fun anymore. Maybe this lady can help you be less scared." The words from his daughter's mouth, words that echoed his ex-wife's departing speech, hit harder than Maya's challenge had. Ryan looked at Lily, really looked, and saw a kid who loved him, but also quietly worried about him. When had that happened? When had his 7-year-old started carrying concern for her father? He picked up his phone before he could overthink it and sent a text to Maya's number. "I'm in. When do we start?" The response came back within 30 seconds. "Tomorrow. My place. 8 a.m. Bring Lily if you need to. I don't mind kids." Ryan stared at that last sentence. No CEO he'd ever worked with had even acknowledged he had a child, let alone offered to accommodate her presence. Maya West was unlike anyone he'd ever met, and that realization thrilled and terrified him in equal measure. Maya's penthouse was not what Ryan expected. He'd imagined cold modern minimalism, the kind of sterile space that said success, but not warmth. Instead, the apartment was filled with light, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the ocean, comfortable furniture in soft colors, and everywhere evidence of a life fully lived. Surfboards leaned in one corner, books were stacked on every surface, plants thrived in ceramic pots. The kitchen was clearly well used, not a showpiece. Maya answered the door in jeans and a loose sweater, barefoot, looking more like she was ready for a weekend with friends than a business meeting. She greeted Lily with genuine interest, asking about school and favorite subjects, and within minutes had offered to show Lily her inspiration board, a massive wall covered in photographs of landscapes and buildings and natural patterns. Ryan set up his laptop at the dining table, expecting traditional work. Instead, Maya paced while talking, gesturing widely, changing topics mid-sentence, throwing out ideas like sparks. She thought out loud, questioned her own assumptions, sketched on napkins, and then crumpled them up when better ideas struck. It was chaotic and energizing, and completely unlike the methodical process Ryan was used to. He found himself trying to keep up, to match her energy, but his training kept pulling him back to safe choices. When he presented his first set of preliminary sketches, careful designs that met all the technical requirements, Maya studied them in silence for a long moment. Then she looked up at him, with something like disappointment in her eyes. "These are good," she said carefully. "They're professional and technically sound. But Ryan, they're safe. They're exactly what I don't want. I hired you for the designs you hid in your drawer." Ryan felt his stomach drop. "How did you know about those?" Maya smiled, but it wasn't smug. It was understanding. "I did my research before I invited you to that beach. I found old mentions of you in architecture journals from 5 years ago. Bold young designer making waves with unconventional concepts. Then you just disappeared from that world and started doing residential renovations. I wanted to know why, so I kept digging. Your divorce was public record. Your ex-wife's quotes in the filing mentioned your shift toward excessive caution. I put 2 and 2 together." Ryan felt exposed, vulnerable in a way that made him want to close his laptop and leave. But Maya moved closer, her voice gentle. "I'm not judging you. Becoming careful makes sense when you're protecting someone you love. But those old designs, that's the talent I need. Can you find that person again?" The question sat heavy in the bright apartment. Lily was on the floor, copying patterns from Maya's inspiration wall onto paper, humming contentedly. The ocean sparkled beyond the windows. Maya waited patiently, and Ryan realized she wasn't pushing him to be someone he wasn't. She was inviting him to remember who he'd been. "I don't know if I can," he admitted quietly. "I've spent 3 years building walls. I'm not sure how to take them down." Maya sat down across from him, and for the first time she looked uncertain too. "I have the opposite problem," she confessed. "I only know how to take risks. My father died 2 years ago. He was an architect, and he spent his whole life dreaming about building an eco-resort on protected land. He never got to do it because he always put other people's projects first, always waited for the right time. When he died, I realized the right time never comes. You have to make it. So I sold everything I had, bought this land, and decided to build his dream. But I can't do it alone, and I can't do it with someone who's just going to give me pretty but predictable buildings." The vulnerability in her admission shifted something between them. They weren't just CEO and architect anymore. They were 2 people carrying different kinds of fear, trying to figure out if they could build something meaningful together. Ryan pulled out his phone and opened the Photos app, scrolling back years until he found what he was looking for: images of his old portfolio, the hidden work. He turned the screen toward Maya. "These are what I used to design, before I decided safe was more important than brilliant." Maya took the phone, her eyes widening as she swiped through image after image. When she looked back at him, her expression had changed entirely. "This," she said, voice thick with emotion. "This is what my father would have designed. This is exactly what I need." She handed back his phone, and their fingers brushed. The contact was brief but electric, and they both felt it. The days that followed developed their own rhythm, different from Ryan's old, careful patterns, but surprisingly comfortable. Maya didn't believe in working in one place. Some mornings they met at her penthouse. Other days she'd text him an address, a coffee shop or a park bench, or once a rooftop downtown where they sketched while pigeons pecked around their feet. Lily came along when she wasn't in school, and Maya never treated her presence as an inconvenience. Instead, she'd ask Lily's opinion on colors or which design felt friendlier. The little girl's input was often surprisingly insightful, and more than once Ryan incorporated her ideas. Slowly, carefully, he began to let himself design bigger again. The preliminary sketches gave way to bold concepts. Safe materials lists expanded to include innovative, sustainable options he'd never tried. The resort began to take shape as something truly special, and with each iteration, Ryan felt pieces of himself returning that he'd thought were lost forever. But the professional collaboration was becoming complicated by something neither of them acknowledged directly. Maya would stand close to review his work, and Ryan would lose track of what he was saying. He'd catch himself watching her move around the room, noting the grace in her gestures, the way she bit her lower lip when concentrating. There were moments when their eyes would meet and hold for a beat too long, when casual touches lasted an extra second. After a particularly productive session where they'd finally nailed the main building's design, Maya suggested they celebrate with takeout and wine on her balcony. It was evening, the ocean turning purple and gold with sunset, and Lily had gone to spend the night with her grandmother. The setting was romantic even if neither of them said so. They talked about the project at first, but then the conversation drifted to more personal territory. Maya asked about his divorce, and Ryan found himself opening up in a way he hadn't with anyone since Sarah left. "I think I lost myself trying to be what she needed," Ryan said, watching the last light fade from the sky. "She wanted adventure and spontaneity, and I wanted stability and plans. After Lily was born, I doubled down on the stability part. Sarah said I became someone she didn't recognize. Maybe she was right." Maya sipped her wine thoughtfully. "What if you weren't wrong or right? What if you were just trying to be a good father, and she was trying to hold on to who she was before everything changed?" Ryan looked at her, surprised by the generous interpretation. "You're saying we were both right and both wrong?" Maya nodded. "I think most relationship failures are like that. Not villains and heroes, just people who needed different things." She paused, then added softly, "For what it's worth, I think the version of you trying to be a good father is pretty impressive. But I also think he doesn't have to disappear completely for you to take some risks again." The conversation shifted to Maya's story. She talked about her father, about growing up watching him sketch buildings during family vacations, about how he'd light up when describing his dream resort, but always found reasons to delay it. "He was going to do it after he retired," Maya said, her voice catching slightly. "He had all these detailed plans. Then he had a heart attack at 58, and all those plans died with him. I found them in his office afterward, years of drawings and notes. It broke my heart that he never took the chance." She looked at Ryan directly. "That's why I push you to be bold. Not because I think safe is wrong, but because I watched someone run out of time before they did the thing they were meant to do. I don't want that to happen to you. Or to me." The honesty was disarming. Ryan reached across the small table between them and took her hand. "Thank you for telling me that, and for seeing something in me I'd forgotten was there." Their hands stayed linked as the evening deepened into night. They talked about other things, lighter topics, shared laughs about failed projects and embarrassing moments. But underneath the casual conversation ran a current of something stronger, something they were both aware of but not quite ready to name. When Ryan finally left, after midnight, Maya walked him to the door. They stood in the doorway too long, the goodbye stretching out. "Same time tomorrow?" Maya asked. "Yeah," Ryan replied, not moving. They looked at each other, and the tension was palpable. Maya stepped closer, just slightly, and Ryan's breath caught. But then his phone buzzed. Lily's grandmother sending a good-night photo of his daughter already asleep, and the moment broke. "Good night, Maya," Ryan said, his voice rough. "Good night," she echoed, and he could hear the same frustration and longing he felt reflected in that single word. The professional work continued to progress brilliantly. The resort design was coming together as something remarkable, and Maya secured a major investor meeting to present their vision. But the personal tension between them was building to an unsustainable level. They found excuses to touch, to stand close, to extend working sessions longer than necessary. Lily noticed, of course. She had started referring to Maya as your friend who makes you smile like you used to, which was both accurate and mortifying. The investor meeting was scheduled for a Friday, and Maya was stressed in a way Ryan hadn't seen before. The night before the presentation, she called him at 10 p.m., voice tight with anxiety. "Can you come over? I need to run through this one more time." Ryan got a neighbor to watch Lily and drove to Maya's penthouse. He found her pacing, hair in a messy bun, wearing sweatpants and an old t-shirt, surrounded by printouts and tablet screens showing their designs. She looked younger, more vulnerable than her usual confident self. "What if they hate it?" she asked, before he'd even taken off his jacket. "What if I've been pushing us towards something too risky, and we crash and burn, and I've wasted your time and my father's dream and everything?" Ryan set down his things and took her gently by the shoulders. "Maya, look at me." She did, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "This design is extraordinary. It's exactly what you envisioned. If they don't see that, they're the wrong investors. But they will see it, because it's impossible not to." She shook her head. "You don't understand the pressure. This is my last chance. I put everything into buying that land. If this fails, I lose it all." The confession changed everything. Ryan had thought Maya was fearless, that she didn't understand the weight of risk because she'd always had a safety net. But she didn't. She was betting everything on this dream, just like he was betting his creative renewal on her faith in him. "Then we make sure it doesn't fail," Ryan said firmly. "We go in there tomorrow, and we show them something they've never seen before, something so clear and compelling they'd be idiots to pass it up." He released her shoulders and moved to the coffee table, starting to reorganize the presentation materials. Maya watched for a moment, then joined him, and they worked side by side until past 2 in the morning, refining every detail until it gleamed. At some point during those early morning hours, exhaustion and proximity and accumulated tension finally broke through their careful boundaries. Maya reached for the same mock-up Ryan was grabbing, their hands colliding, and neither pulled away. They looked at each other, really looked, and the question that had been hovering unasked for weeks finally surfaced. "This is complicated," Maya whispered. "Very," Ryan agreed. "I don't do complicated well," she continued. "Neither do I," he admitted. "But maybe that's exactly why we should try." He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull back, but she didn't. She met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it felt like something clicking into place that had been misaligned for a long time. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, then deeper as weeks of restrained attraction found release. When they finally separated, both breathing hard, Maya rested her forehead against his. "What do we do now?" she asked. Ryan laughed quietly. "I have absolutely no idea, but I know I don't want to pretend this isn't happening." Maya pulled back enough to see his face. "What about Lily? What if this doesn't work?" The question sobered them both. Ryan thought carefully before answering. "Lily already adores you. She told me you make me smile like I used to. If you and I try this and it doesn't work, that would hurt. But I think what would hurt her more is watching me be too afraid to take a chance on happiness." They didn't sleep that night, but not for the reasons Ryan had imagined hours before. Instead, they talked until dawn, honest conversations about fears and hopes and what trying meant. They agreed to take it slow, to be honest with Lily, to keep working together even if the personal relationship complicated things. By the time the sun rose, they felt exhausted but settled. The investor presentation was at 10 a.m. Ryan went home to shower and change, kissed Lily's sleepy head as she ate breakfast with the neighbor, and met Maya at the meeting location at 9:30. She wore a professional dress and heels, her confidence restored. But when she saw him, she smiled in a way that was just for him. "Ready to do this?" she asked. "Together?" Ryan took her hand briefly, squeezed it, then released it. "Together." The presentation went flawlessly. Maya was brilliant, passionate, articulate. Ryan supported her explanations with technical details and responded to questions with confidence he hadn't felt in years. The designs spoke for themselves, images of a resort that looked like it belonged to the landscape rather than imposed upon it. When they finished, the investors exchanged looks, and the lead investor smiled widely. This is exactly what the market needs right now. Luxury that doesn't destroy what makes the location special. "We're in." Maya's hand found Ryan's under the table, and they held on tight while maintaining professional expressions. The meeting wrapped up with handshakes and promises to begin contract negotiations immediately. As soon as they were alone in the elevator heading down, Maya let out a sound between a laugh and a sob and threw her arms around Ryan's neck. He caught her, spun her slightly, both of them grinning like idiots. "We did it," she breathed against his shoulder. "You did it," Ryan corrected. "I just drew what you already saw." Maya pulled back, keeping her arms around his neck. "We did it. Together. That's how this works now." The weeks and months that followed were an adjustment. Ryan and Maya navigated the complexity of being professional partners and beginning a personal relationship. There were stumbles. Ryan sometimes retreated into old habits of caution when Maya pushed for bold choices. Maya sometimes forgot that Ryan needed to plan ahead for Lily's schedule and would suggest spontaneous evening meetings. They learned to communicate better, to express needs instead of expecting mind reading, to compromise without either feeling diminished. Lily was involved from the start. Maya came to dinner at their house, helped with homework, joined their weekend routines. She taught Lily about architecture and sustainability. Ryan taught Maya to cook simple meals and showed her that not everything needed to move at maximum speed. They became, gradually and naturally, something that looked like a family. The resort construction began 6 months after that first investor meeting. Ryan and Maya stood at the site together on the first day, watching bulldozers carefully clear only what was necessary, preserving every tree they could, working around the natural contours. Lily was with them, holding both their hands, chattering excitedly about how this was going to be the best resort ever because they built it together. Ryan looked at Maya over their daughter's head. Well, his daughter, but maybe becoming theirs in ways that mattered, and saw his own contentment reflected back. This was not the life he'd planned. It was riskier, more complicated, less controlled. It was also richer, fuller, more alive than anything he'd built in his years of playing safe. Maya caught him staring and mouthed, "What?" Ryan just shook his head and mouthed back, "Nothing. Everything. Thank you." A year later, the resort was nearly complete. The grand opening was scheduled for a Saturday in late spring. Perfect weather, the landscape in full bloom. Press and investors and community members were invited. Lily, now 8 years old, had appointed herself unofficial tour guide and took her role very seriously, describing sustainable features to anyone who would listen. Ryan and Maya stood together near the main building, watching guests arrive and explore. The design had translated perfectly from paper to reality, exactly what they'd envisioned. Maya leaned against Ryan's shoulder, tired but triumphant. "We actually did it," she said quietly. "You doubted," Ryan teased gently. Maya laughed. "Not the resort. Us. I doubted we could make both work, the professional and personal. It seemed like too much to ask for." Ryan wrapped an arm around her waist. "And now?" She tilted her face up to kiss him softly. "Now, I can't imagine one without the other." As the celebration continued around them, they slipped away with Lily to the beach where Ryan had first interviewed, the place where everything had started. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Lily immediately began building something in the sand, and Maya and Ryan sat down to watch her. "Remember when you asked if I could take risks?" Ryan said after a comfortable silence. Maya nodded. "I remember. You looked terrified." Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I have one more risk I want to take." Maya's eyes went wide. "Ryan." He opened the box, revealing a ring with a simple band and a stone that caught the sunset light. "I know it's only been a year. I know this is fast. But I also know I want every morning to start with you, even when you burn the pancakes." Maya laughed through sudden tears. "I'm getting better at pancakes." "Marginally," Ryan agreed, grinning. "Say yes anyway." Lily looked up from her sand creation and saw what was happening. She squealed with delight and ran over, practically vibrating with excitement. "You're asking her? Now? I thought you were going to wait until her birthday." Maya looked between them, realization dawning. "You both knew about this?" Lily nodded proudly. "We picked the ring together. Dad said it needed to be as brave as you are." Maya's tears spilled over properly now. She cupped Ryan's face with both hands. "Yes. Obviously. Yes. How could I say anything else?" Lily cheered, and Ryan slipped the ring onto Maya's finger with shaking hands. They kissed while his daughter danced around them, and several guests who had wandered down to the beach started clapping. The private moment became public, but neither of them minded. This was their place, where they'd started, and it felt right to begin the next chapter here too. The wedding happened 6 months later, small and intimate, on the resort grounds they'd built together. Lily was flower girl and took her responsibilities so seriously, she made a checklist. Maya wore a simple dress and walked barefoot through the grass. Ryan cried when he saw her, not caring who noticed. They wrote their own vows, promising to take risks together and build both dreams and safety, to balance each other's extremes, to always remember that the best things in life require both courage and care. After the ceremony, after the dinner and the toasts and the dancing, the three of them walked down to the beach one more time. The sky was full of stars, the ocean a dark whisper. Lily fell asleep between them on a blanket, and Maya and Ryan talked quietly about their future, about the projects they'd designed together, about maybe expanding their family, about growing old and still working side by side. "Do you ever regret it?" Maya asked suddenly. "That morning I made you interview on the beach. If you'd said no, your life would have stayed simple." Ryan considered the question seriously. "My life was never simple. It was small. There's a difference. Simple can be good. Small just means you're hiding." He looked at his sleeping daughter, then at his wife, still getting used to that word. "I don't regret a single scary decision since that morning. Every risk has been worth it." Maya kissed him softly. "Even the burned pancakes?" Ryan laughed. "Especially the burned pancakes. They remind me that perfection isn't the goal. Living fully is." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars reflect on water, and Ryan thought about how much had changed since that first email at 11:13 on a Tuesday night. He'd thought he was applying for a job. He'd found a whole new life instead. Years later, when people asked how they met, Maya and Ryan would smile at each other, and Ryan would say, "She invited me to the world's strangest job interview." Maya would add, "He showed up in dress shoes on a beach." And Lily, now older, would roll her eyes and say, "They're leaving out the best part. Dad fell in love with her immediately, but was too scared to admit it for months." She'd be right, of course, but that was okay. The story of how they got from that first morning to this full life was worth every moment of fear and uncertainty. Every morning still started the same way, coffee at 6:15, but now there were 2 mugs side by side. Maya still couldn't cook without supervision, and they laughed about it constantly. Ryan still made careful plans, but he'd learned to leave room for spontaneity. They built more resorts together, each one pushing boundaries a little further, each one reflecting their shared vision of beauty that didn't dominate nature, but partnered with it. The coffee still came at 6:15. The morning still started the same way. But Ryan Cole's life was no longer about safety and predictability. It was about taking chances, building dreams, and loving fearlessly. And every morning, when he saw Maya smile across the kitchen table and Lily chattering about her day ahead, he knew that the best risk he ever took was saying yes to an interview on the beach with a CEO who taught him that sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is play it safe.